this video today, I am going to answer some questions put to me by Jenny from Murphy's Garden. Jenny has been struggling to get the best out of two big borders in her garden, and she has asked for some advice. I will now let her explain what the problems are, and I will follow on with my suggestions.
My name is Jenny from the garden YouTube channel Murphy's Garden, and I regularly watch Rosy's channel and find her expertise is so beneficial in helping me to improve the planting in my own garden. Our garden is in North Shropshire and is about an acre in size. We've divided it up into lots of different garden rooms, and one of the areas, this area here where I am, consists of two large perennial borders, and it's in these borders that I'm having a real problem getting the planting right. As you can see, we're doing a big redesign in this area, and we've added water, we've added a rill up the middle. We haven't finished it, we've literally just dug the hole, but we've had lots of rain in the last day or two, so it has actually filled up with water, so you can get a feel for what it's going to look like, but we've got a lot more work still to do here. But as part of that redesign, I do want to revisit the planting in these big borders. I did a video in the autumn in which I sort of was editing the borders and trying to make changes, and I had a lot of comments from other people who were struggling with similar issues to me. So for this reason, I contacted Rosy, who is the queen of perennials, to get some expert advice. I just really want to know how to improve perennial borders so that they perform better and for longer and throughout the whole season. And hopefully this advice will be beneficial to not just me, but other gardeners watching too. So the first thing that obviously Rosy needs to know is the site. So we'll just discuss the site that's here. The borders measure 3 metres in width by 14.5 metres, so they're quite large, I suppose. They're south facing and are surrounded by a small beech hedge. We've put the beech hedge in just to shelter these borders from the wind. They've also got a box hedge which just runs around the side and the front. The box hedging is looking a little bit dodgy after the winter that we've had and the summer that we've had, a very wet year. So there is a little bit of blight, so whether they will stay in the long term, I'm not quite sure. The height of the beech hedge is about 1.5 metres or about 5 foot, and width is about 1 metre or about 3 foot 4 inches. And we do maintain that hedge, so we won't allow it to get any bigger than that. In fact, it might not even be 5 foot, it's maybe more like 4.5. So we will keep it at that. We won't allow it to get any bigger. The borders currently have 3 wooden obelisks, and I have Olivia Rose, a David Austin rose called Olivia Rose, growing up those. They're fairly newly planted. They've just started to get going, but if they're not right for the border, I don't mind moving them if necessary. I have 3 Stipa gigantea planted in each of the borders, and they're quite front of border. There was a bit of a problem. I put them in first, and the middle one, when the obelisk went in, the obelisk had to sit right behind the Stipa, and I don't really know whether that looks right or not. The Stipas look beautiful when they're lit by the sort of evening or the morning sun, and they really stand out and look lovely. But again, if there was a better grass or a different grass that Rosy recommended, I'm not precious with anything. I'm happy to have a big change. And the rest of the borders are just filled with perennials, which I'll go through in a minute. But I just want to say that I'm happy to take everything out and start again, or work with what I've got. I don't know really what to do. So yeah, Rosy, if you've got any advice. Although I've got some nice perennials, one of the things I think is a problem is that some of the perennials I've got may not be the best variety, so I'm keen to get advice on ones that are stronger performers. For example, I've got Echinacea purpurea, which every year just collapses. It's always very disappointing. And I know from watching Rosy's channel that there are a lot of better echinaceas that I could go for. We're on very sandy soil, very free draining soil. However, we are producing a lot of garden compost, and I'm now got into the routine for the last sort of 3 years. I've been mulching these borders every year with our compost. I love perennial plants. I understand the work that's involved from cutting back to splitting, and I'm not necessarily looking for a low maintenance garden. I enjoy gardening and I'm happy to put the work in.
So where do we start? She has now put in a still water rill right down through the centre of these two. So you've got these beautiful big long borders, you've then got grass, and then you've got this new still water rill in the middle there. Now I'm going to start with that first of all, Jenny, because I want to make sure that you have put in animal ladders into that rill. I don't know how deep it is, and it doesn't really matter whether it is this deep or this deep. So anything from 6 inches, 20 centimetres through to 2 feet, 60 centimetres, it doesn't really matter. You must put in animal ladders, and they need to be at the ends in the corners and also halfway up. This will stop things getting in there and not being able to get out. You do not want your neighbours' cats, you do not want squirrels or anything like that drowning in that water. So always when you put water into a garden, make sure that there are escape routes for any of the local wildlife, four-legged, to get out of those rills if they get into trouble. Also, you will find as you're walking up and down, if you haven't got across, you may think you can jump over it, but you'll be tired, and there'll be a time when remember to put some stepping stones, and I would suggest 3 down there, lovely stepping stones, so that you can do the quick across the water to get to the other side. Just my suggestions, but there you go. That's my one thing that I would say with doing with the rill. I'm going to tick off these things that I've written down just so that you get through to that. Let's go back to the beech hedge. You say you're maintaining it. I've noticed with the videos that you've sent me that you've actually planted right the way up to that beech hedge. In my mind, that's a no-no. You need an access maintenance path between the hedge and the starting of the border. It doesn't have to be massively wide, and it doesn't have to be a stone path. It can be a bark path that you just put down there. That way, yes, some of the perennials will creep into it, but if you're using that quite regularly to maintain, not only will it be much easier to maintain the hedge itself, it'll be easy to get into the back of the border, because a 3-metre wide border is quite big to get at from the front to get into the back if, say, something needs staking or you've got some weed that has got into there. So that is something that I would suggest, putting in a maintenance path at the back of the borders. Okay, so that's my first thing that I would go with there. Then we come on to that box hedge, and you've got this box hedge going all the way around the front. You said it's already getting blight. Caterpillar is coming in and heading further north. You're North Shropshire, much further up than we are, but the caterpillar is getting up there as well. Do you know what? I just go for the jugular and just take that out completely. I don't think it helps. I don't think it enhances the type of border that you've got. I'm anti putting that sort of hedge around, because apart from anything else, it stops the plants at the front being able to do their lovely dropping over. It also stops and holds airflow. Even though you're in a windy site and you may think it's helping, it actually will create more problems within the edges of the border, because it's stopping air getting through at that height, and that's a very important level of airflow that you need through the borders. So those are things. So I would take the box hedge out. What do you replace it with? I would go for some lovely slabs, and I would actually edge round the whole of those 2 borders with slabs, so that you've got that bit of, again, maintenance area, a definition of where the border finishes, where the grass starts, and that way you don't get entangled with cutting the lawns and everything else. That all works really, really well. So those are the key things that I think you need to start thinking about and doing straight away, and getting that sorted out. So that is another bit on there. So we've organised that bit.
To get a good display in the spring, I planted purple sensation alliums, Echinacea Magnus alba, along with Aquilegia, verbascums, lupins, delphiniums, oriental poppies, all those kind of things. And in the spring, in May and into early June, these borders look beautiful. They really do look lovely. However, what happens is the Camassias go over and everything goes over at the same time, and the borders look really, really bad. The Camassias look very untidy when they go over, and it's a lot of work actually getting rid of all the foliage and try not to stand on other things as they emerge through. So I'm not really sure whether it was a mistake planting Camassia bulbs in these borders. I have removed some of them, but it's always a bit alarming in the spring when thousands of little green shoots come up, and I know that they're all Camassias, and I'm a bit concerned whether they're affecting perhaps the vigour of other plants. I'm not sure.
Now, you say you've got chaos with the Camassias. Now, I love Camassias en masse. However, I have become less of a friend of Camassias now I've grown them myself quite a bit, and you do get an awful lot of leaf that goes over. In a herbaceous border, they are not the right plant. I know, looking at your pictures, they look fantastic, but as you said yourself, they are not really any good for the border because they just seem to smother things, and then you get left with 2-3 weeks of untidy leaf. You can't do anything with it. Pull them out, put them somewhere else, put them in a more wild area, in amongst grass. That's where they should be, because then the grass comes up and covers them. So get rid of the Camassia, get them out of there. If you've got oriental poppies, a no-no for a big border like that, because they come up and they look great for their 3 weeks that they're up, and again, a bit like the Camassia, and then you're left with a big lump of foliage. Okay, it stays green and then it dies back down again, but really not the best plant choice for that area.
By July, these borders look really bad. There are big gaps as lots of the early summer plants have finished flowering and the late plants just haven't got going. So unlike my other perennial borders nearer the house, which feature kind of smaller, daintier plants, and they make a great kind of picking garden, these borders are seen from further away, and so the cottage garden style used elsewhere just doesn't work in these borders. I think I need bigger, larger clumps and less plants, and sort of to repeat the same plants again and again. However, what I'm struggling with, I need to ensure that whatever plants I choose, they must have a long season of interest, as I don't want these big gaps when things go over. So when these borders were first cut out, I was quite daunted, and I didn't have a large budget, so I just bought lots of small plug plants. I did plan it all out and I put these plug plants in, but over time some sort of disappeared and just didn't get going, and others kind of took over. And so where there were gaps, I bought more plants and just kind of filled them in, shoved them in, got given plants, shoved them in, and as a result the borders now contain Achillea, Sedum, Helenium, Eupatorium, Hydrangea, Rebeccae, Dahlias, Verbena, Lupins, Salvia, Lyastra, Delphiniums, Verbascum, Phlox, Monarda, Campanulas, and Echinacea, and probably more that I haven't thought of. It's only when I listed them all out I realised I've got far too much in these borders, and the result is that the borders are chaotic and a bit of a riot, really. I can't say I don't really enjoy gardening in these borders as I do elsewhere, as they're just so complicated and difficult to keep on top of. So I'd like to be able to plant clumps and mulch around them to suppress the weeds and feel a little bit more in control. I also love plants that have a really good seed head and look good over the winter months, and so I like to leave the seed heads in place, and they often look good throughout the winter months. Our garden is incredibly windy, and you'll see from the steeper, which normally still look quite nice at this time of year, all the flower heads have been broken because the garden is very, very windy, and it's been particularly windy this winter. I currently have to stake a lot of the plants, but if we can possibly choose plants that don't require staking, then that would be even better. So as I said, I did have a go at making revisions to the borders in autumn, and I removed a rather muddy looking phlox called Sherbet Cocktail, which had run riot all over the far side of the border and looked really bad. And I split and tried to make bigger clumps of the plants I love, such as Heleniums, Rebeccae, Eupatorium and Veronicastrum. I only did part of the border, and then I got a bit nervous about removing things that looked so nice in May, so I did remove some of the lupins, and then I worried that the border would look uninteresting in early summer. So Rosie, I really need your help. So should I rip everything out and start again? As I said, I'm open to suggestions. I want these borders to look different from other parts of the garden. I quite like the sort of prairie style look, the kind of Pierre Udolph kind of style. We went to RHS Bridgewater and saw a lot of these plants growing, and I really like the look of that. So other parts of the garden are kind of pinks and purples and yellows and things, but I would welcome an injection of perhaps a more vibrant colour palette, so like burnt oranges and purples and all those kind of colours. So thank you, Rosie, and I really look forward to hearing your response.
So when the chaos of the bulbs has gone through, you've got no rhythm within the borders, and I think that's because you started off without much of a plan. And I understand it's very easy to have these areas and go, oh well, I've got to put plants in there, I've got offsets of these, I can put splits in, I can get plugs, I can put it all in, but then you end up with a little bit of chaos, and it doesn't give you any rhyme or reason or anything else. You said to yourself there are 1 or 2 elements in there you really like. I love the stiper, and I have no problem with you having stiper at the front of the border. It is absolutely excellent. It goes really, really well with your beautiful tripods that you've got there for your roses. Those look great. You want some structure like that for the winter months. Looking at the size of your stiper gigantea, they need to be lifted, split, and then you can move around. I would say 3 is not enough. I think you need 5 clumps, 3 at the front, 2 slightly further back, and that would make much more impact in the whole thing, and that would give you the bones of structure to start with, and then you will be able to go on and actually be able to create the look that you are wanting for in the borders that you have created. There are certain things that you have said, and you say you're happy to take the whole lot out. You've already removed some phlox that was taking over and just not in the right place. You've kept 1 or 2 things that you really like. So there's some Hylotelephium that you like, and there are other plants, some of the Heleniums, etc. And then right at the end, you've realised that actually what you're wanting is not what you'd put in. You're wanting a slightly more structured, a slightly more feel with more grasses and that type of thing. So if we go for the point of view that you have got this border, we are removing the hedge, we're putting a path along the back here. We're making these into slabs down here all the way along the front. You're going to split your stipers up, and you're going to keep the 3 at the front and create another couple nearer the back, just behind your rose tripods. That gives you really good sense of pattern, and I think what you've got to do with this border, because it is so long, is you have got to decide, right, I'm going to split it into thirds. I am going to create a third, which I then repeat, and I think that will be the best way for you to create the flow and feel that you are wanting in the actual border itself. You say you've got Echinacea purpurea, well that will be really good, but it's collapsing. That sounds as though it's getting too much food. So remember that the Echinacea wants slightly poorer soil. So you've got the sandy soil already and you're mulching, but perhaps remember some things don't require mulching every single year, so that is something to consider. Certain areas of the border, certain plants will want more mulch, so your roses definitely will want mulching. But other areas of the border, you may think, right, I'll just mulch the back half of the border 1 year, and then the following year you mulch the front half. That way you don't get too much in the way of nutrient going in, and that will help completely. So what you're really needing to do is have much bigger clumps of each particular plant, because initially looking at those pictures you sort of put in 1 of something here and then maybe 3 of something there. These borders need 5s and 7s of things, and they want ribbon planting. So you want to be moving the plants through so that as you walk past, you see a ribbon effect of the plants going through it. I think you need to be looking at some other grasses to go into this to create your background of the actual thing. So I would look at some Molinias, Calamagrostis. You could look at those. Those are good plants to grow. They're easy to grow. They will give you that form that you want. And probably for later season, a little bit of Penisetum. So those would be your key plants there. Heleniums will be brilliant, and you can get tall heleniums, shorter heleniums. Stick with your Echinacea. I think if you just don't feed it too much, it will be absolutely fine. Also, I get the impression because of where it was and it was next to that hedge, it was being forced up rather than being slightly clumpier. And maybe go away from straight Echinacea purpurea and go for 1 or 2 of the slightly shorter varieties and the older varieties. So things like Magnus are really good. Now it is taller, big flowered form, but a very good, strong plant. If you can find one of the shorter pink ones or shorter white ones, that will help as well. The Heleniums, there are lots and lots of varieties out there. Some of the newer varieties are much freer flowering. And you will get your oranges and yellows by utilising those. And that is obviously the colour scheme that you're thinking of, because you've got the softer colours elsewhere. So go for those types of plants. Coreopsis will do really well for you. And so things like Mercury Rising, which is a burgundy coloured one, and maybe Schnittgold, which is taller and a big yellow, they would be good. Now I think something like Cephalaria would also go very well in there, but steer clear of Cephalaria gigantea because that will get too big, too thuggy. You want to be using something like Cephalaria alpina. It doesn't create such a large base, but you get a beautiful wiry effect. And from looking at what you've been looking at, like the Pate Oldolf and Bridgewater plantings, you're wanting that sort of wiry effect. Veronicastrums, you need those. This is your autumn, your later season. Again, the Veronicastrums Challenger is a shorter form. Apollo is taller. Diana, there are all sorts of different forms of those, and those will give you your upright spikes, which you're going to need, as well as your lower planting further down. So there are lots and lots of plants that you can utilize and use in there. I will draw up a list and those we can discuss, and I will also just have a further look at this, but I really firmly believe that you need to be now digging up, removing everything that you really didn't like, keeping the plant material you do like, so your Hylotelephiums, the sedums, and there were Heleniums and some other things that you liked as well. Keep those in the mix, and then have a slightly smaller palette of plants. Yes, you can put in a few alliums, but I would suggest you put in perennial alliums, not the bulb forms. So you're wanting to utilize things like Allium lavender bubbles or Allium millennium, because those will make clumps. They will be neat and tidy. They will flower for a much longer period. So that's the sort of thing that I would suggest. And in the first couple of years, you will also need to be growing a few cottage garden annuals, so a few cosmos, a few Nigella, maybe. Just be careful with the Nigella because it can then seed around all over the place. But they will look good and they will fill the gaps until the herbaceous has created its own framework and looks really good. I hope that has really helped you and put you on the right footing as to where you want to be with these two borders. Thank you very much for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel.